This is Beyond the Big Screen podcast with your host, Steve Guerra.
Thank you again for listening to Beyond the Big Screen podcast. We are a member of the Parthenon.podcast network. Of course, a big thanks goes out to Garry Stevens of the History in the Bible podcast. Links to learn more about Garry and his podcast can be found at historyinthebible.com or in the show notes. Garry is a frequent guest of both Beyond the Big Screen and the History of the Papacy. I always enjoy talking to Garry, good friend, and I think you will definitely enjoy today's episode. A great way to support Beyond the Big Screen is to leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. These reviews really help me know what you think of the show and help other people learn about Beyond the Big Screen. More about the Parthenon Podcast Network can be found at Parthenon.podcast.com. You can learn more about Beyond the Big Screen, great movies and stories so great they should be movies, on Facebook and Twitter by searching for A2Z History. You can contact me there or just send me an email to my email address, steve@a2zhistorypage.com. Links to all of this and more can be found at beyondthebigscreen.com. I thank you for joining me again, Beyond the Big Screen. Today we're going to talk about a movie called Noah, a 2014 movie produced by Darren Aronofsky, who brought us movies such as Pi, The Wrestler, which Garry noted that he liked that, and I like that movie as well, and several other great movies. The runtime for this movie was 2 hours and 17 minutes, or forever. I'm not sure. It was a close call. It starred Russell Crowe, Jennifer Connelly, Russell Crowe as Noah, and he's a countryman of yours, right? And a fellow Australian?
Technically, he's a Kiwi, but we claim all New Zealanders as Australians, so yeah.
He's really a versatile actor. I've really enjoyed just about every movie I've seen him in, although he's one of those actors like he's basically the Australian Tom Hanks. He's Russell Crowe in every movie.
A slightly different Russell Crowe, but he's still Russell Crowe.
Yeah, I mean, he almost has the same haircut in every movie. The haircut and the beard, that's he's Russell Crowe.
Yeah.
Then you have Jennifer Connelly.
And he'll beat you up.
Then you have Jennifer Connelly, Noah's wife, Nama. And Connelly, she's an American actress, and she's starred in movies of various quality. She won an Academy Award star opposite Russell Crowe in another Russell Crowe movie, A Beautiful Mind. Oh boy, maybe that's another one for the future episode. Then we have Ray Winstone, starring as
lovable Ray
Winstone. No. He stars as somebody named Tubal Cain, who probably doesn't come up in your memories of Sunday school class, but he's in there, and he's really the ultimate bad guy of the movie. He really needs to take a couple of comedic roles, but he's typecast as a Cockney gangster, and he kind of plays one in this movie. He never really drops the Cockney accent at all. What did you think about old Ray in this movie?
Well, he's a good meaty actor. He's got a not very wide range, but the Cockney accent, I mean, listening to it, the more I listened to it, I thought, if you'd played it with a Welsh or Scottish accent, it'd be just as inappropriate. But somehow I suppose it sort of works. But to me, I found it a very thick accent, whereas the rest of the cast seemed to be playing neutral, transatlantic or mid-Atlantic accents.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree. His was out of place for sure. Then we have Emma Watson, who had a major role. She played Noah's daughter named Elah. She's not mentioned at all in Exodus, but we'll get into that. She's a British actress, and she's really well known for her role in the Harry Potter movie series.
Yeah.
You didn't think she was very well cast in this movie, though.
No, I thought she was too fragile. Pretty much all the other actors looked like they could actually survive in that environment in their sackcloth primitive clothing. But Emma Watson, she seemed to me as though she was dying to get to the nearest fashion store to put on something wispy and delicate.
She was a little bit out of her element in this movie.
Yeah.
The next one, Logan Lerman. He's an up-and-coming American actor, star of the Percy Jackson movies. And Lerman plays the much-maligned son of Noah, Ham. I thought he did a decent job. And he gets a lot more action, I think, in this movie. He kind of gets more play in the movie than, say, Noah's other sons, Shem and Japheth.
Yeah, Japheth doesn't get much of a part at all, does he? He just sort of hangs around and is noble and helps things. The actor playing Ham, at least, was acting. He showed emotion. He had range. He did things. The other kids just sort of, yeah, okay, we'll pick up the paycheck or something.
And we'll get a little bit more into into Ham's character, but I think I didn't always get where Ham was coming from, but I guess also in the Genesis version, I didn't exactly know where Ham's coming from. So maybe Aronofsky did nail that. Mm. Then we have Anthony Hopkins, who stars as Methuselah, Noah's grandfather. And I mean, he's the venerable Anglo-American actor. I guess you could say it's more of a cameo role, but Methuselah really doesn't appear in the actual Noah story in Genesis, but he has a pretty decent role in this movie. Yeah. Anthony Hopkins, he's been in some of the greatest movies of all time, really, since his earliest days. So, I mean, you got to cut the guy a little slack. Yeah.
I think in the film Noah, Hopkins plays Methuselah in a slightly distracted way, doesn't he? It's like Methuselah isn't quite there, or he's just had too many magic berries.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it was so far that Anthony Hopkins, this was a paying the mortgage role. Mm. He put more into it than that, but it was more, we got to find a place for Anthony Hopkins, so why not make him Methuselah?
Yeah. Yeah.
At least he's not a robot or, CGI character like Nick Nolte was as one of the Watchers, which you would never even know it. Yeah,
that's true. That's true. Yeah, you wouldn't even know the actors who were doing the voices for the Watchers, because they put them through some sort of synthesizer, didn't they, to deepen them or something?
The main Watcher was Nick Nolte, which, like I said, you would never even have known it, which you'd think you'd want to, try and put Nick Nolte on the marquee. The movie was released in late March of 2014 in the United States and very shortly after worldwide. It had a budget of $125 million, which is really not that off the wall, and a box office of almost $400 million to this point, which is, I would assume in Hollywood, a raving success, despite the movie not really making a lot of waves.
Yeah, that's true. I suppose the religious nature of the film must have attracted a lot of box office. It's a decent enough film, but you wouldn't, if it had not been a religious film, I'm sure it would have only taken in a fraction of that.
The things that we had talked about, Gary and I, is that this is a tricky movie to talk about, because if you're looking at the Noah story, you really have to talk about Noah, but also tie it into the other flood narratives that fed into what the Noah story became. But there's an additional complication to this movie that maybe you can tell us a little bit about, Gary.
The big complication is something which probably confused many moviegoers when they walked into the film. It starts off with a prologue of these angelic beings who have come down to earth to help Adam and Eve, not realizing that God doesn't want them to help Adam and Eve. And in return, the angelic beings get turned into basically rock monsters. And I'm sure a lot of the audience was going, what on earth are these? They aren't in the Bible. Where did they come from? In fact, these angelic beings are known as Watchers in the Book of Enoch, the incredibly important pseudepigraphical work which was rediscovered in the Dead Sea Scrolls. It's in the Ethiopian Orthodox canon, and it describes the coming of these angelic beings, watchers, to Earth. Now, watcher apparently comes from an Aramaic word, and in Aramaic, that word watcher is an exact synonym for angel. So the watchers are angels, and then trapped on Earth, and they become a huge part of the story. Now, I don't know where the script writers got this stuff from. First, Enoch is not exactly a well-known book of the Bible, but there's some academic out there who obviously had some input. And quite large chunks of the movie are not just from the Genesis story, which is a fairly plain tale. It's from the Book of First Enoch.
I thought that was really interesting that they brought in the Enoch. And like I said, if you look through the internet, there's not a lot there that says why they used Enoch so much.
I couldn't find anything. Did you actually find any hard facts as to did someone go to Aronofsky and say, hey, we've got all this material from a book you've never heard of?
No, I did not see anything on there.
No, I really don't know where it comes from. Apparently there's some other movie in production which uses the Watchers. I found that on, IMDb, the Internet Movie Database, when I Googled the character Samayez, who's the head of the Watchers. Yeah, so apparently there's another movie out there about these people, things, angels.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fascinating that they're folding in that story into here. The Noah story, you can't ignore that there's a really rich history of Mesopotamian flood stories that really fed into the Noah story. Really, the Noah story is relatively young compared to the various Mesopotamian iterations of the story that go several thousand years earlier than the Noah story.
Yes, I mean, flood stories in Mesopotamia seem to be a dime a dozen, don't they? So they obviously must be based on some sort of historical recollection of the flooding of the Tigris or the Euphrates or something. In the Mesopotamian flood stories, unlike the Noah story, the basis of the flood is a conflict between the gods. In the Genesis story, the flood is caused by God to eliminate a wicked humanity. In all the Mesopotamian variants, it's usually a story of the primitive chaos monsters of the deep, say, rising up against the gods, and the gods must fight these sea monsters in order to save, well, both themselves and humanity. So the whole basic plot is radically different to Genesis, but it is nonetheless a flood story. The sea monsters actually do appear in the Bible in several different places. They're known as Leviathan and Behemoth. So even the Hebrews adapted some of this mythology, and it survives as remnants in the Bible of these ancient monsters. And somewhere, I think it's a psalm, there's a psalm where God is saying about how he defeated Leviathan and put his foot on the neck of Behemoth. So I thought that's interesting. That's an interesting tone.
I read something interesting that the older flood stories, the Atrahasis, that was one of the oldest ones, and then the Gilgamesh story were really a man versus gods or man versus nature story, whereas the Noah story, Noah's really a minor character, and it's God is the main character of that story. So it kind of flips the story on its head that God needs to wipe the slate clean, and Noah's there too.
Yes, from what I remember in the Mesopotamian stories, men play quite a major part. But as you say, in the Genesis story, Noah is simply God's pawn or handyman, sidekick, almost incidental in some ways.
I thought from my reading of the Genesis story, it was God is the general contractor again. Build this ark, build it this way. And they can even track where the Atrahasis version, the earliest version of the flood story from Mesopotamia, it's a traditional Middle Eastern, southern Iraqi, modern Iraq boat. And then that boat or ark goes through several different designs. The Gilgamesh story is almost like a skyscraper floating, which is even more absurd than the Noah of a classical boat dimensions.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about the Ark before we dig in. The Ark is really as much of a character in the story as Noah is.
Yes, it is. Nowadays, the Ark is depicted as something like a big ferry, isn't it? And the Ark, as described in the Bible, has the dimensions of a typical European car ferry. So if you want to go to, Scandinavia and then to England, you'd be getting on a boat about the size that the Ark is meant to be. In the movie, the Ark is depicted much more as a barge rather than a boat. So it doesn't have any pointy ends. It's not meant to plough through the waves. It's just meant to go up and float and then come down again. I thought that was a bit of an interesting take compared to the traditional picture that people have in their minds. And I think there are medieval illustrations which depict it as a classical boat-shaped thing. Mm-hmm. So the fact that in this movie it's really just a big box that floats, I thought, okay, that's a nice way to describe it.
I liked that depiction of it because in Genesis, if I'm not mistaken, they didn't explain that the boat, it doesn't have any motive power.
No.
It doesn't have sails. It doesn't have oars. It's really just meant to float.
It's just meant to float. One interesting thing is that the word ark in Hebrew used to describe Noah's boat is the same word used to describe the little vessel that Moses is put into when he's put onto the Nile, and that is the only place in the Bible where that Hebrew word is used for ark. The box, which is the Ark of the Covenant, that word ark is in fact a completely different word in Hebrew. So presumably when Moses is put into his little ark, the authors of that story are purposefully going back to the Noah story and saying that Moses will rescue his people just as Noah rescued humanity.
Tell us a little bit about Noah's family before we dive in here.
Noah is the son of Lamech, who is the son of Methuselah, who is the son of Enoch. And if I remember correctly, Moses is the 10th generation or 9th generation down from Adam. He's one of what are called the antediluvian patriarchs, which makes sense, before the flood. And all these people have incredibly long lives, in the hundreds of years. After Noah, you find in the Bible the longevities of all the patriarchs radically shrink. So he's a patriarch. His grandfather Methuselah is famous, of course, for his longevity. He's the longest lived of the biblical patriarchs. And before him there is Enoch, who is the purported author of the Book of 1st Enoch. Enoch is super duper special because in Genesis, Enoch doesn't die. He is said to have walked with God. And there's only one other person in the Bible who doesn't die, and that's the prophet Elijah. Everyone else dies. But those two are said to have gone to God. And that little fact about Enoch really stuck in the Hebrew consciousness for centuries and centuries, that somehow this guy was special. And that's why you get all these books written, purportedly by him. So it's really Enoch who's the really interesting character in Moses' ancestry. In the film, though, Enoch doesn't appear, and all the little weird curio things about Enoch and his personality are transferred to Methuselah. For the obvious reason, I suppose, that everyone knows about Methuselah, no one's ever heard of Enoch.
I think there was one tiny mention of Enoch where they said something about Methuselah's grandfather, Enosh. That was a throwaway line. Yeah. Something Shem said, I think.
Yes, I think there's just one throwaway reference.
Tell us a little bit about these really long lifespans. Are there any theories behind that?
I think it comes from the Sumerians. The Sumerian king lists list their kings, and they give them incredibly long reigns. I mean, they make the biblical patriarchs look like youngsters. In the Sumerian king lists, you'll typically find so-and-so king reigned for 10,000 years. So-and-so king reigned for 100,000 years. So this idea of giving people from the distant past long lifespans, I'm pretty sure that's where the Hebrews got it from. It seems to be traditional. The actual numbers don't really work out. It's sort of, if you make a big chart of everything, then it's sort of weird. You find out, for example, that Noah would have still been alive when Abraham was born, and didn't die until Abraham was 60. So you're thinking, okay, Grandpa, you've been around for not 700 years. Yeah, okay.
Noah has 3 sons, and this is all in Genesis. He has Shem, Ham, and Japheth at the time of the flood, and Noah's 600 years old. His sons are in the hundreds-ish, even though they're really young. And in the movie, Shem is played by the British actor Douglas Booth. Japheth is really young. He's maybe 10-ish. And he's played by Leo McHugh Carroll. And then we had mentioned Ham.
In the Bible, the description of the sons is very simple. It's just done in a sentence. It simply said, there's Noah, he's got these 3 sons and their wives. So in the biblical text, all the sons are already of an age to be married, and they have unnamed wives. I think Jewish tradition and the movie gives names to these other people. For example, Noah's wife is called Namar or Namer or something in the movie and in tradition, but she's certainly not named in the Bible. So in the Bible, Noah has a nice youngish family, but they're all married. Not the 10-year-old or a 20-year-old, something like that. So the movie changes that.
There's one more character outside of Noah's family that makes a big splash in the movie, and that's Tubal-Cain. Can you tell us a little bit about him?
Tubal-Cain actually does appear in Genesis, so he's not made up. He is the son of a character called Lamech. Now, Lamech also happens to be Noah's father, but it's a different Lamech. So that's an element of confusion there. Tubal-Cain is described in the Bible as the author of instruments of copper and iron. So he's a metalsmith, and he's the guy who invents metalworking. And that certainly comes through in the movie. Tubal-Cain,
yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Tubal-Cain spends the entire movie making weapons of war, pretty much, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's all he does. So that's in Genesis. It's not in the flood story. Tubal-Cain is not in the flood story, but he certainly is in Genesis. It's like the authors or the screenwriters have pulled little bits out of Genesis and the Book of Enoch and go, oh, that's a nice little detail. Let's stick that in. Maybe doesn't actually fit the story, but at least we can say it's in the Bible.
They say that there's 2 lines, the lines of Abel and the line of Cain. And Tubal-Cain is the evil line, Cain, who had killed Abel. Is there anything to that?
Well, that's certainly in Genesis. There are 2 lines of descent from Adam and Eve, given that Abel was killed. The 2 lines come from the son Cain, which in the movie is depicted as irredeemably evil, horrible, nasty. Oh, no, let's get rid of these people. And the line of Seth, which is Noah's line. And they're depicted as the nice people. I don't think that's how Genesis depicts the 2 lines, really. So, yeah, the Cainites, and actually that's one thing that comes through the movie a fair amount. There's one image which you see in silhouette several times in the film, and that's of Cain raising a rock above his head to kill Abel.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that image pops up, and you're constantly reinforced in the film that Tubal-Cain's line, going back to his great, etc., grandfather Cain, is a line of wickedness and horror. And that's sort of reinforced by their clothing. All of Tubal-Cain's people wear stuff you would find in an orc raiding party in Lord of the Rings. Really dark, ugly, horrible clothing.
And now, a brief word from our sponsors. Yeah, I thought Noah and his family, I call it apocalyptic chic clothes. It was, they had well put together outfits, although it was apocalyptic, whereas the Tubal-Cain, his group was just completely barbaric.
That's a really good description, actually. Apocalyptic chic. Yeah. Noah's family looked like they've gone to a fairly upmarket department store for the period and got clothes that fit. All the other guys are sort of... I almost expected Gollum to appear at some point amongst all the evil people. Really just depressing. That's another thing about the movie. Most of the landscape is really bleak and horrible. I mean, the whole theme of the movie is like the story that humanity is evil and wicked and must be destroyed, and the land has been corrupted. Most of the scenery in the place is really horrible. Now, I looked up where it was filmed so I can make a note never to go there. And apparently a lot of it was filmed in Iceland. So I'm crossing that country off my list.
Oh, boy. At least it wasn't upstate New York. Another element that they threw in was the Lord of the Rings. It really did look like Sauron's kingdom, at least from the movies, where it was a burned over industrial land. Like they were really playing up that industrialized brownfield. Yeah. I guess that is an upstate New York thing of brownfields, but they really played that part of it up.
Right. I think that's something we haven't mentioned, actually. Another theme of the book, of the movie, which ties it into the Book of First Enoch and the Watchers, is that the Watchers bring industry to the world, and they make it like a Lord of the Ringsy type Mordor civilization. And this industry, which is run by Tubal Cain's people, the descendants of Cain, it covers the world, and it's horrible. Now, in the Book of First Enoch, that's exactly what the Watchers do. They bring the arts and crafts to humanity. And, of course, this is a terrible thing because we can't have humans learning anything. When we all know that from the Garden of Eden. Well, we can't have them knowing too much.
Yeah, don't dare learn anything.
Yeah, don't dare learn anything.
Another thing that we had noticed from the movie is that they never say the word God exactly. And God, he's mentioned indirectly, but he's always referred to as the creator.
That's true. Yes, I think there's only one maybe place in the whole movie where they use the word God. I think that just sort of slipped in. Every other single time, the angels, the Watchers, refer to the creator. All the humans refer to the creator. It's never God, which gives it it feels a little odd, doesn't it?
Yeah, I felt as the movie too, it tied it to the Book of Genesis, but then it also separated it where God's close, but in the movie, I think he too much came up with the way the Watchers and Noah talk, that he was like the boss that never quite shows up to work on time.
Yeah.
And when he does show up to work, you're always in trouble.
Yeah, that's the only reason he comes to work, to abuse people. You're not doing it right. I'm sorry. And he spends the rest of the time in the Bahamas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or calling in sick. Oh, my kids are sick today, so I can't come in. But you better make sure you do this, and this. And that's the way the Watcher rock monsters and Noah always act about the creator.
That's true. Whereas in the story in Genesis, God speaks directly to Noah. God is there as a living presence. In the movie, he's not there as a presence at all, is he? That's a big difference, actually. Hadn't thought of that.
Let's talk about Noah and the animals.
Oh, yeah.
The animals are a huge part of the movie and the story, the Genesis story. How are animals depicted?
Now, the ark is constructed in the Book of Genesis simply by Noah and his 3 sons. Presumably the wives are sitting around cooking all day. In the movie, it's fairly obvious that 4 people could not build this enormous wooden construction unless they took centuries to do it. So the movie enlists, as an attempt at naturalizing the process, I suppose, the fallen angels, the Watchers, the rock monsters, to do literally the heavy lifting. And I thought in the movie, oh yeah, okay, that's reasonable. Now I can understand how this tiny little family built this enormous thing. They had supernatural help, courtesy of the rock monsters. So I thought that was an interesting way to show it. Because if you'd just shown little Noah there putting it together, you'd be watching the film and go, nah, 4 people, and you're handling beams which are yards long. I mean, how are you doing that? How are you doing that? So I thought that was interesting.
Do they explain in the Book of Enoch what the Watchers are or what they look like?
They're angels. In Enoch, they're just angels. They're never described. The angels in Enoch are the first description of fallen angels, and they're fallen because a group of angels, led by this guy called Semyaza, who actually appears in the film, which is interesting. They use his name in the credits. It's Nick Nolte who voices him. Semyaza and his band of angels look on human women and go, oh, okay, right, let's get down to it. So for some reason, they start mating with human women, and this is a sexual abomination. And so God curses them. And the good angels, Michael, Uriel, Raphael, and Gabriel, look down on earth and go, whoa, can't have this happening. So they send the Watchers into an abyss, a pit, after the Watchers have mated with human women and created this race of giants. And First Enoch actually says how tall these giants are. They are something like 1/2 mile, 1 kilometre tall. That's the measurement they're given.
Oh, wow.
How a human woman... Yeah, oh, wow.
Whoa.
Yeah. So they must have grown real quick after they were born. And these giants are held to have despoiled the earth, sort of like in the movie, actually, a bit, and caused human suffering and started to eat people. And that's why the giants had to go, and their parents, the fallen angels, the Watchers, had to go. So that's basically the story of the Watchers in First Enoch.
Most of the cargo of the Ark was holding animals. And in the movie, there was a lot of, I don't even know what you would call them, mythical creatures that they would show. But then also when Noah called animals, like regular animals, would come too. I thought there was a cool scene where Tubal-Cain eats like a weird animal. And then I guess we don't have that animal right now because Tubal-Cain ate one of them.
That's right. It's this weird sort of cross between an armadillo and a dog or something, isn't it?
Yeah. And he eats one of them, and then there's not one. Can you tell us a little bit more about animals in Noah, the movie, and Noah, the Genesis story?
In the Genesis story, there are 2 separate sources going on in the Noah story. This is a well-known scholarly theory that's been accepted for about 100 years. These 2 sources seem to interleave in the story. In one source, Noah brings in animals 2 by 2, just like we all learnt in Sunday school. In other parts of the Noah story, it's said that he brings in 7 pairs of all the clean animals and 1 pair of all the unclean animals. So you've got 2 different traditions there. In the movie, we have the traditional animals flocking to the ark scene, which is always, that must look really good on the big screen. I suppose it loses some sort of impact when you look at it on a television. But on the big screen, it must have been impressive to see all these different types of animals converging on the ark. And what Noah does, and this isn't in the Genesis story, he puts them all to sleep. His wife makes up some incense, and they go through the ark, and all the animals are on, and they all fall asleep. And I rather like that touch because, again, it naturalizes something. Because if you're thinking about the ark, you're thinking, okay, right, all these animals are sitting there, they're eating, they are defecating, they're trying to eat each other. How did that work? Yeah, it's not that big. So the movie explains that nicely by saying, okay, well, they're all basically hibernating for the entire time they were on the ark. So I thought that was a nice little touch.
Well, first, Methuselah blesses, that's what the word they use, blesses Emma Watson character. She is infertile in some way. They really don't explain why she was infertile, but she becomes fertile, and Shem knocks her up. And Noah...
No, it's not.
Tell us a little bit about Noah's big plan for humanity.
Noah becomes convinced that the ark is there for the animals alone, but that all the people, his family, are going to die, and that's a really good thing. So Noah has obviously been smelling too much of the incense because he becomes determined that once the whole flood's over, his family will die out and there'll be no more humans. That's not in Genesis. That's the exact opposite to what's in Genesis. So Noah has this huge personality change at some point in the film and decides that his family will be the last humans to ever live. So he gets really upset when Emma Watson gets pregnant. Oh, does he get upset?
She gets pregnant, and so a pregnancy, she gets pregnant on the ark, and a pregnancy takes 9-10 months-ish to play out. And so that leads us to the conclusion that they're on the ark about 10 months. And
that's certainly the implication.
Yeah. How long are they on the ark in Genesis?
There's, again, the two sources differ. It's either 40 days or 150 days. So
either way.
Yeah, either way. Now, there is one throwaway comment that Noah's wife says, because when Emma Watson is about to give birth, Noah's wife says, "So soon." And it's just this one little line there. So I'm wondering if that's what the filmmakers have put in there, because everyone knows that they're on the ark. Well, most people think 40 days and 40 nights. That's not a human pregnancy. That is not the length of a human pregnancy. So I'm wondering if that's the filmmaker's nod. Maybe a pregnancy is supernatural. But gee, it must be stressful on the body, mustn't it? Having a kid develop in 40 days instead of 9 months.
And even at 150 days.
Even 150 days, yeah.
That was the one thing that they played out too, that it seemed like they were on the ark forever. Where 40 days and 40 nights isn't that long.
No, it isn't that long. And I must admit, Russell Crowe's hairstyle goes pretty wild in that time, doesn't it?
Yeah.
He visibly, not ages, he visibly deteriorates, I think you could say. So the movie certainly implies that they are there for quite a while, which is not in the Genesis story. And, of course, we haven't mentioned the special surprise that Tubal Cain is hit out.
Yeah, that was great. Yeah.
Yeah. And not only that, Tubal Cain's been hiding there for months, waiting to get his revenge on Noah. Because Tubal Cain hates Noah, because that's just what Tubal Cain does. He just hates people. I suppose we should have talked about the actual big flood scene, shouldn't we? We've sort of jumped.
Yeah, if we rewind a little bit, the flood scene in the Genesis account, it says that the windows of heaven open. I think that's how they put it.
Yeah.
And the I used the New King James Version, something to that effect. And they say something to that effect in the movie as well, right?
When Noah is predicting the flood, and in the film, Noah has a vision about the flood. In the Genesis story, God actually tells him. But in the film, it's a vision of some sort. And Genesis, I think it specifically says about the heavens opening and here's the nice little detail, also the waters from the deep shall rise. So you're going to have upcoming water, which would be flood, I suppose, and downcoming water, rain. And that's exactly what happens in the film. Not only do the heavens open up, but also water spurts out of the ground in gigantic fountains. So that's quite faithful to that little detail in Genesis. I thought that was interesting.
I thought what was so interesting when it ties back into the Mesopotamian flood stories is that the Mesopotamian Valley, the lower Mesopotamia, really did flood in any way that you would think is like an apocalyptic flood, that basically the lower third of the modern country of Iraq, every once in a while would be gone. Those are real floods that science has documented. And if you lived in that time and place, I don't know how you'd otherwise think that the whole world wasn't flooded.
Yeah, I mean, if it's that large an area, it'd be from horizon to horizon, wouldn't it? You'd think
easily.
You'd think it was the end of the world.
Any of the other theories that I've heard about floods, that it was I think when they said something, there was a flood at one time where the Black Sea and the Mediterranean Sea connected, but that was so far before recorded time. I don't buy that. But a reasonable flood that was documented to have happened during the times of Ur and those major Mesopotamian civilizations. Half the lower third of the country of Iraq turning into the just melding into the Persian Gulf is definitely something that you would think like, whoa, that's a serious flood.
Yeah, that seems a reasonable view. I've heard that Black Sea theory, but that's way in the Stone Age, isn't it? That's tens of thousands of years ago, longer or something. I find it hard to believe that was survived as a memory. Whereas,
I don't believe that.
Yeah. Whereas the Tigris and Euphrates must have flooded fairly regularly.
Now, Tubal-Cain, he's on the Ark, and all the while he's on the Ark, he's putting these little ideas into Ham's mind. Now, in your technical terms, you call that a crock of poo.
Yeah.
But that all leads into a bigger idea of Ham. Tell us a little bit about Ham.
Ham in the movie gets really irritated with his father, Noah. When Ham tries to save this young girl from the evil tribe of Tubal-Cain, and Noah basically stops him. So his putative girlfriend is left to die. So Ham is just absolutely beside himself with this. And he strikes up a plan against Noah. He's angry and resentful. And he basically keeps Tubal-Cain alive on the Ark, Tubal-Cain who's hiding out downstairs, by feeding Tubal-Cain lizards or something like that. And Tubal-Cain, of course, eats them in the most delicate possible way by biting their heads off.
And offering them. Yeah.
While Tubal-Cain...
That's only the polite way to do it.
And now, a brief word from our sponsors.
There's a really key scene in the movies. Let's back up a little bit, where the Tubal-Cain people really portrayed as almost like a non-human people, really, attack the Ark, really trying to get on the Ark. And all during this way, it's pouring like monsoon rain, and it's also geysering up water. And the Watchers fight them off. Can you tell us a bit more about that particular scene?
It's probably the great dramatic set piece of the film, isn't it? The heavens have opened, there's water shooting up from the ground, and all the descendants of Cain, led by dear old Ray Winstone, decide to assault the Ark because they've suddenly realised, we're all going to die. And Noah has been making sense. He's built a boat. So en masse, the hordes of Tubal-Cain rush out. But defending the Ark are the lovable rock monsters who've managed to construct these giant chains which they string between themselves to defend from the attacking horde. And it's quite dramatic as the rock monsters are going through, clubbing people, throwing them off, hitting them with the chains. Tubal-Cain, to his credit though, has invented artillery, or at least mortars. So he manages to fire a mortar into one of the rock monsters, kills him, and gradually the hordes of Tubal-Cain overwhelm the rock monsters. Interestingly, given that the rock monsters are defending the Ark, as they're overwhelmed, their rock covering sloughs off, the angel reappears and shoots up towards heaven. In other words, God has redeemed the rock monsters, turned them back into angels, because they've defended Noah and all the animals in the Ark. It's a really good scene, and it's made... the drama is not just the hordes attacking the Ark. It's the massive amount of rain and water that's shooting up. If they actually used real water in that scene, and it's not just all CGI, those actors must have been utterly drenched and miserable, because it would have taken days and days to film that.
In Genesis, did they make the people out, the antediluvian people, as like some sort of, I hate to use the term subhuman or like not human? I think that's the way that they were really portrayed in the movie, that they really weren't people.
Yeah, in the movie they aren't people. They're sort of vicious savages below humans, aren't they? In Genesis, the people are simply described as wicked. They're certainly not described as subhuman. They're just evil. They haven't been, eating the right foods, doing whatever God tells them to do. They're just wicked.
Yeah, that's really what I got from the Genesis version, is that they were just like bad people, not like not people.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. They're not subhuman. They're just bad.
But then again, Ham does find that one girl who's good for some reason. They don't really explain why she's good. Is that something, maybe that's something in the movie that they're trying to say, is that there were some good people in there, and that the wicked Noah, like Noah, who's not quite piecing together the message God's sending, is...
You mean totally misinterpreting it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are you saying now, God?
Yes, I suppose Ham, yeah. Amidst this great scene of chaos, Ham finds his girl, and this is the point where this innocent girl, who gets trampled over by the screaming hordes, she gets her foot in a bear trap. Ham tries to save her, but Noah just grabs Ham and says, "No, we're out of here, mate." And this poor innocent girl dies. Well, they all die because they're in the flood. And that's where Ham's resentment to Noah starts, which is not in Genesis. Not in Genesis. Adds an element of drama.
Like even Methuselah gets wiped out in the flood, which, I mean, you've got to imagine Methuselah's good enough.
You'd think so, but in as depicted in the movie, in his happy, trippy way, Methuselah, who spent the entire movie looking for berries, because he really likes berries, finds some berries, and at the instant he eats his last berry, he looks up at the heavens, and then Gawanga! He is blown away by this huge wave of water with a big happy smile on his face. Because the only people who can survive, of course, are Noah's family.
Noah and the ark. We really don't have anything in Genesis about Noah and the ark. They're just floating around there waiting for whatever's going to happen. But then in the book, or in the movie, Noah has some inter-family conflict, you might say.
Yeah, you could say that, because Ham's running around deeply resentful that he hasn't got a girlfriend, and said girlfriend was trampled to death thanks to his father. And I would be resentful of that too, I suppose.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So when Ham stumbles across Tubal-Cain, who miraculously has managed to hack his way into the ark at the very last minute when the flood's coming on, he sees Tubal-Cain, I suppose, as someone who may be able to help him, and nurtures Tubal-Cain, who's been injured in his attempt to get into the ark for several months. The Genesis story says nothing about what goes on the ark, as you say. They're just hanging around, waiting for the water to go away. And just before that happens in the movie, Tubal-Cain has revived his strength and then decides to go and kill Noah. Simultaneously, and fortunately for dramatic tension, at this very point, Emma Watson decides to give birth, knowing that Noah has resolved to kill her child if it's a girl. If it's a boy, not a problem, because there's no one else to reproduce with. But if it's a girl, says Noah, she's got to go. I thought that's a little bit sexist.
Who's she going to reproduce with? It kind of leads your mind into like, oh, what kind of, what's going on here?
Point, yes, given this family basically has to commit incest now for the next 20 generations or whatever. That's never really brought out, is it? In any of these commentaries.
J-Path standing there. Yeah, okay, all right.
Right, so if I have a boy and a girl, they'll have to marry. Yeah, okay, we'll think about that in a couple of 100 years. So there's this big fight on the ark. In the end, Ham stands up for Noah as opposed to against him. Big fist fight between Ray Winstone and Russell Crowe. The Aussie wins, good for us, because Ham stabs Tubal-Cain. And rather touchingly, after Tubal-Cain has been stabbed in the back by Ham, he gets a big smile on his face and says, "At last, you're a man." I thought, okay.
Yeah, I like that part.
Yeah. And I thought, okay, you're evil, but you're going out in style.
That's the part with Ham. Is he just a victim of circumstance? Has he gone over to Tubal-Cain? Has he not gone over to Tubal-Cain? Like, you don't really understand. Ham's like the only human person there, like who has human motivation.
That's a very good point. He's the most three-dimensional character in the film, isn't he?
I think so. Like Shem, Shem's mad at Dad that Dad Noah might kill his children as soon as they come out of the womb, which he does try. I mean, let's not mince words here. Noah does try. Shem is always on Noah's side, where Ham, we don't know where Ham stands.
No, we don't really do it. Yeah, Shem is the good son. He's sort of like the Aragorn character in Lord of the Rings. Noble, upright, helpful, handsome. Ham's more like someone who's just found the ring, and he's thinking about putting it on his finger at times.
Tubal-Cain's dad.
Poor
Tubal-Cain.
He tried.
He failed. He did his best. He was killed by Ham, who we thought was his buddy, but then Ham turns his back, and he actually is on Dad's side. Let's not take anything from Ham. Ham does stick up for Noah here.
Yeah, he sticks up, and he sticks Tubal-Cain.
Poor Tubal-Cain, dead, laying in the ballast of the ark.
But Noah has another drama to take care of. The birth of not one, but two girls. So Tubal-Cain's just disappeared from the scene. Now Noah has the grisly duty of killing his own grandchildren. Right, okay. So they go outside and have a big dramatic scene on the roof of the ark, and Noah he's lifting up the knife at the very last minute. And I think what happens is Noah has spent the entire time so far inside the ark smelling the incense, but now he's out in the fresh air. Whoa. What am I doing? Ooh. Whoa!
Yeah.
And he has a sudden change of mind. He decides, for no apparent reason, not to kill the two grandchildren. He was desperate to do so. And everyone sighs a big sigh of relief and bursts into tears. And I think just at that point, the ark hits a rock, doesn't it? Bang! Whoa, rocks!
Yeah. Then the very next scene is the ark washed up on a mountain, and Noah is in there getting drunk. Tell us the Genesis version first.
Yes, the whole story in Genesis is basically the biblical authors having a big dig at Canaan, who is Ham's son. What happens is Noah is said to have invented viticulture. And of course, if you're growing grapes, what are you going to do? You're going to get drunk. In both the story in Genesis and the movie, it's not entirely clear why this happens. It just happens. Maybe Noah is still recovering from his psychotic episode in an attempt to kill his grandchildren. Or maybe he resents not killing them. Who knows? So the scene is basically a cave on a beach. Noah is drunk and he's naked. Whoa, can't have that. Ham sees his naked father, and this is a terrible transgression. The other two sons come up and walking backwards, so they can't see Russell Crowe's naked backside, if it is Russell Crowe, not a body double. They walk backwards with a big coat or something and drop it over Noah. In the Genesis story, because Ham saw the naked Noah and the other two sons didn't, Genesis then curses Ham's son Canaan. Not Ham himself. Oh, no. For some reason, it's just Canaan. And the only possible reason is that the Bible's having a big dig at the Canaanites and saying, whoa, this is why you guys are condemned to be slaves to the Hebrews. And it actually says that in Genesis. From now on, you shall forever be slaves to the Hebrews. In the book, in the movie, you don't really know what's going on because the scenes just come out of nowhere.
Yeah, Russell Crowe's there just absolutely knackered. Is that a British term for getting drunk?
Knackered is tired.
What's a good British?
Plastered. Is that an American term? Yeah, plastered.
Plastered or any other euphemism for getting drunk, plastered or
hammered. That's a
hammered.
Hammered.
On wine, and Noah becomes kind of a Dionysius type figure, and he's getting drunk and he passes out. They show a couple of different, like 2 takes of him. He gets drunk and he like passes out in the sand. And they don't really like Ham. I don't understand. I guess if I take what I took from the Genesis version, he just kind of walks into Dad in the tent and he's drunk, passed out, naked. Like you said, he takes the Facebook selfie of him and he's kind of getting a laugh on Dad's expense. But then Japheth and Shem like very solemnly drape Dad over with the cloth. So I guess Ham and his progeny from here on out in eternity really just completely called out, cursed by God, because they got to laugh at Dad's expense.
And in the movie, shortly after that scene, Ham just walks off, doesn't he, into the sunset. The rest of the family's hanging around, but Ham just goes, God knows where. He just walks off with a big backpack.
But Noah doesn't seem particularly mad at him either.
Sort of accepts it all quite well.
Yeah, I don't understand the Genesis. Now, I've heard other interpretations that Ham might have done something inappropriate to Noah whilst laying there, but that doesn't come across to me at all in the text.
It's not in the text at all. Yeah, where did I hear that? I think that appears in later Jewish tradition, because later Jews were just as confused about the story as we are. So they invented this idea that maybe, I don't know, there's a bit of like unpleasantness going on there. And that's why the bad things happen to Ham's kids.
Because, I mean, if it's all about getting a cheap laugh at Dad, the Stevites will be cursed to the end of time. I mean, you're going to get a cheap laugh at your dad if it was Noah the one who was passed out drunk. What did Ham do?
Well, yeah.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Ham should have probably not have taken the picture of him and posted it. Yeah.
But that's not a hanging offense.
No. All right. Ham's a jerk. Okay.
But then he's got good reason to dislike his father. And Ham did save Noah's life. Maybe that's why Noah's got...
sure. Yeah. Ham his progeny becomes the Canaanites, who are the ultimate fall guys in the Old Testament tales.
The Israelites hate the Canaanites. Hate them with a passion. And I think the feeling is mutual.
And the Israelites are kind of offshoots.
Oh, yeah, according to modern archaeology, they are Canaanites. Yeah.
Back around.
Maybe that's why they hated each other so much. It's like Serbs and Croats or something. They're so similar. They've got to hate each other.
And that gets back to our Exodus. What I really like about Noah and how it ties into the Exodus is that there really is this melding of Mesopotamian and Egyptian culture and mythology here. You get a sense of both of them as you read into the Bible.
Yeah, that's very true. And I like the way that they've tied in with First Enoch, introducing this academic aspect to it. One little touch I liked was the snakeskin tephilim. Yeah.
Yeah, I like
that Noah wraps around his arm. I actually looked that up today. I wanted to investigate. I wanted to get the name right for a start. Apparently that's meant as a memorial to the Exodus. So it's a little ahead of its time in this movie. But, yeah, I thought that's a nice touch. And Noah passed that ritual down from his father, Lamech, and from Methuselah, I suppose.
Yeah, I thought that was a nice touch to connect it back to Adam. That Adam was always in the background of this movie.
Yes, he is. Adam, Abel, and Cain. That image keeps popping up of Cain whacking Abel. The snake makes a lot of appearances at random points, pretty much. And the snake skin, which is the actual material Noah uses for the tefillin. That's a nice little touch.
So as a movie watcher here, Garry, where do you stand with this movie? What are your final takeaways? What's good about it? What are your bees in your bonnet? And how would you recommend this movie?
I'd give it maybe, say, 2.5 stars out of 5. It's not something I'd pay that much to watch. The photography is quite good, but so the landscape is so dismal. It's quite depressing to watch in a lot of ways. It's not like the grandeur of Egypt. It's just a horrible landscape.
I'd have to give it Maybe not quite 2.5 stars. I think I'm gonna go a little bit lower with 2 stars on it. I think it's worth a view. I don't know the context you'd watch it. If you were just bored one night and wanted to watch a movie, and if it was on like your if it was something that you could search on like your cable or dish, I'd watch it. It's not really a date movie. It's not a family movie either.
I think you should definitely see it if you have to make a podcast review about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Besides that, I don't know. And if you want to watch it after you watch a podcast review of it.
I think Emma Watson's a bit miscast. She's too fragile, too thin, too petite. Ham, the actor who played Ham, he did a good job.
Yeah.
Didn't mind Russell as usual. His wife, Jennifer Conley, she does a competent job. Yeah, and
she's okay.
Stone spends a lot of time maiming, wounding, and killing.
Yeah, he was. It's definitely a movie if you're bored and you don't know exactly what to put on your DVR. Yeah, sure. I guess it's as good as anything. I can't say that it's like, wow, you got to see this one. But then again, that's just my opinion. Like I said, I don't know how that fits in with your. If it fits in with your movie watching, then definitely go for it.
If you've got a choice between Noah or Exodus, Gods and Kings, go for Exodus, Gods and Kings.
Yeah, I would agree with that.